Well, in high school, I was really big into TV production. So I graduated high school thinking I was going to do sports journalism.
Oh, okay.
I love sports. I love journalism. I love being in front of the camera. And so I was like, you know what? That's what I'll do. I had the option of doing, which I just, I was young and I was done. And looking back on it, I don't regret anything. But I just did not pick the school for that. I knew I wanted to do some sort of therapy because the kids that I were working with, they came from, lower income backgrounds, parents, they were doing all that they could, but they didn't necessarily have the emotional intelligence to really support their children.
Sure.
At first I was going to go the psychology route, but then I was like, well, psychology is more so focusing on the brain and stuff like that. I kind of want to focus on the entire person as well as their environment.
So as an adult, right, you happen to be another person who is in the mental health field, right, specifically in social work. And so I want to learn and help the audience understand a little bit more about what caused you to want to pursue that particular field.
So I originally, in high school, I was really big into TV production. So I graduated high school thinking I was going to do sports journalism.
Oh, okay.
I love sports. I love journalism. I love being in front of the camera. And so I was like, you know what? That's what I'll do. But I think I just didn't make the sound decisions as far as just where I went to school at, because I had the option of doing, which I just, I was young and I was done. And looking back on it, I don't regret anything, but, I just did not pick the school for that. Florida State was not, they had Seminole Productions. We have, great sports teams and things like that. But I just felt like there were other options, better options. UCF, those were some pretty good schools when it comes to journalism. And so I just didn't pick it. So anyway, that ended up not working out. And so I was in this organization. It was a community service organization. And we would do volunteering at this local church. And I also was in a service learning class, and we would volunteer as well. And both were after school tutoring opportunities.
Awesome.
And so that's where I kind of developed my passion for working with kids. In middle school and high school, I was a counselor for a summer camp down there, and it was fun, but I was like, whatever, I want to do TV. So, I'll just forget about
the
kids for a little bit.
The kids can watch me when I'm on TV.
Exactly. So anyway, life happened, and so I started getting back into what I knew. And at that point, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do with it. I knew I wanted to do some sort of therapy because the kids that I were working with, they came from, lower income backgrounds, parents, they were doing all that they could, but they didn't necessarily have the emotional intelligence to really support their children. And so at that point, I didn't know exactly how to go about therapy. At first, I was going to go the psychology route, but then I was like, well, psychology is more so focusing on the brain and stuff like that. I kind of want to focus on the entire person as well as their environment. So my friend, she was in the actual BSW program at Florida State. And so, once, junior, senior year started rolling around, she was telling me about the MSW program. And so I started looking into Masters of Social Work, seeing the different options and stuff like that. And I was looking at, how much you can make when you become licensed. And I was like, oh my God, sign me up. I can do this. So that's pretty much how I got started in social work. I went through, like I said, I want to say between end of 2016 to 2018, I went through a lot of rough stuff. And so my GPA wasn't even to the point where I thought I was going to get in. So I was holding on with a prayer. I didn't know I was going to get in, but I applied. Thankfully, I got in. And then you also had the option of either going the clinical route or the social leadership route. So I decided to do clinical, and that's pretty much how I ended up where I am at now. So
that's very interesting. It is, I always find it kind of funny in general, right? Like how we end up picking the paths that we pick. I don't know about I'm going to ask you in a moment. I don't know what your parents' educational background is like, but for me, I'm the first one in my immediate family to like get a bachelor's degree. My father got like up to associates because he's an RN nurse, and education was always very important. But there was definitely different expectations kind of set between me and my sister, and I was kind of like the high achiever. So I just kind of naturally kept pushing myself. But one of the things that you said that kind of stuck out to me for a moment was you struggled at times academically, and I had similar experience. This to me goes back to why it's so beneficial when you have those good relationships with your parents and there's wisdom that they can give to you. Unfortunately, my father didn't have a lot of the experience in this particular area, so not that he could have given me a lot, but something's better than nothing. But I had to figure out a lot of that stuff on my own. And I happen to have learned as I've gotten older, a lot of people in the Black community in particular, that's a lot of our lived experience. We commonly say things like we're first generation students. And so first generation means what? Like we make all the mistakes because nobody's really guiding us. We're just kind of trying stuff and trying to figure out what works. So our GPAs may suffer. We may not get into the programs that we wanted. We may have to pivot into something else because we don't have like these beautiful organized systems, particularly within the family structure, where maybe both parents have gone through the collegiate system. So they understand a lot about what tips and tricks to tell you so that way you can be successful once you make it to that level. A lot of us don't get that. So we kind of slip, trip, fall, bump our head, and then we have to keep trying to figure out, okay, how can I still work towards whatever objective? And so I had a very similar experience to you. Like I kind of went up and down for a little while. Thankfully, once I got to UCF, I was able to be very, very focused on it, locked in, and I was able to do much better. But it took that period of kind of bumping my head and making these pitfalls that I think probably wasn't absolutely necessary. I think for a lot of us, it's not to say we're going to have this seamless process. Like you're a perfect student. For a lot of us, we have to work. So we don't have the benefit of having somebody kind of absorb all of your financial burden. You know, so you have to work, which means that's going to eat into some of your time to study, things like that. Those are like inherent challenges that like we may face as a cultural group more than maybe others, so to speak. So I think that that's important because you said that was kind of a determining factor, not maybe the biggest one, but part of what caused you to kind of make that pivot. But also in just thinking about how we find these fields. So the helping fields, right? Now I'm not in social work, to be fair. I'm a mental health counselor. They are different. A lot of people don't understand the differences, right? I'll break it down real quick because I actually don't think I've ever actually done this on an episode. And I remember we had to talk about this at school. So you got psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and then usually mental health counselors, marriage, family therapists, school counselors. Like we're all kind of more or less the same. Just the environment's different. So I would always explain, so psychiatrists are the medical doctors that actually go to medical school and they just specialize in psychiatry. Psychologists, from my experience, you know, most of them they have to go like the highest education route you can go. Some of them go the master's, but a lot of them go bachelor's to PhD or PsyD. And they're usually big on assessment, testing, evaluations, things like that. Like in my experience, it's been severe and persistent clinical mental health disorders, right? Which is not the stuff that I typically deal with. Social workers, I think a lot of us are maybe a little more accustomed to them. They're like the people you think about where if you're in a hospital setting, if you have to deal with like children being removed from homes, abuse allegations, all these types of things, they're the ones that are helping sometimes with like the case management side. Some of them do actual therapy with their clients. So they can, you know, very multifaceted. But the modality and how you all are trained, in my experience, is a little bit different than how mental health counselors are trained. Triage, you see a lot of them work with like police departments, emergency services, right? You don't necessarily see counselors and traditional therapists in that sense do that. They tell us, I believe it's true to a certain degree, we try to go from that. We say everybody uses the term holistic, but I believe in terms of physical, mental, and emotional health, almost like this trifecta of areas that you need to pay attention to. So you're considering their environment that they came from. You're considering their parental relationships. You're considering if they have any type of biological, actual disorders, something genetic that they might have been predisposed to. And then the approach, of course, is a little bit different in terms of how other professionals are trained. So it's not a dig on anybody. It's just more to understand when we're describing these things.
Yeah.
So you going down that social work route is slightly different, obviously, than what I do, but the impact is very much in the same wheelhouse. Would you agree?
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay. So just piggybacking on that a little bit, back to you, how do you foresee maybe your impact being in the social work realm? What is it that you're maybe hoping to achieve?
Well, my main goal right now is to get my license, to become a licensed clinical social worker so that I can do like, you know, real therapy. Like I've been a master's level therapist and things like that, but being able to have my license, I'll just, you know, have a little bit more flexibility and things like that. So right now that is the goal. I know, you know, I've had thoughts. I have no clue as far as how I'm going to make it happen or how it's going to look or how soon I want to do it. But I have had thoughts about, you know, way far away from now, kind of like opening up my own center for kids. So kind of like an after school type situation.
Okay.
There is this place, a quick shout out, Palmer. It's called Palmer Monroe Teen Center up in Tallahassee.
Okay.
Volunteered there a couple of times. And it's kind of just like an all-encompassing opportunity for teens, like obviously an alternative to them going out doing stuff that they're not supposed to do
On the
after
corner.
school. Yes, exactly. So just, you know, providing them with the ability for like different like life skills, different like classes,
Yeah.
athletic opportunities, but then also kind of like bringing in the opportunity for like, you know, mental health counseling, therapy, and things like that. So that is something that eventually I want to do. Like I said, it's literally just a thought. I have no clue how
Sure.
I'm going to, you know, make it happen. But I do know, like, once I, you know, get a little bit of footing in this field, a little bit more experience and things like that, that is something that I want to eventually accomplish, even if, like, you know, it's you going back up to Tallahassee and, you know, doing something with the already existing center or finding, you know, something like that in the area that I'm in. I do know that that is a passion of mine, though, and something that I do want to accomplish one day.
Sure. It's interesting. I'm not familiar with that organization, but shout out to them regardless in terms of what they're doing. But when you described that, it reminded me of the Boys and Girls Club.
Yes, that too.
What you described,
Yes.
which I'm a huge advocate of. I'm a
Yes.
product of the Boys and Girls Club.
Yes, I volunteered with the Boys and Girls Club. I think another shout out, you know, shameless plug or whatever. The Oasis Center for Women and Girls. I was, we did this, there were weekly group therapy sessions with kids it was, for the most part, I know I had a group at the Boys and Girls Club, but there was also another center, and I hate that I am blanking on it right now. It might have still been the Boys and Girls Club, but I can't exactly remember. But we work with them a lot too, and that's exactly what they offer as well.
Okay.
But I just remember the Palmer Monroe Teen Center just because it was like an actual.
No, that
like,
makes sense.
You know, but yeah, so that is definitely
Different people out here doing the work.
exactly. But those are both amazing organizations. So.
Yeah. I try to talk about them because my experience when I was growing up, I'm from Gainesville, Florida, and that area is like, especially when I was growing up, was very kind of just black and white for the most part. And so for me, it was a very firm, I would say, split between, more or less in middle school, like where people went. So for example, there was the Boys and Girls Club, which I feel like majority of the people were like people from the BIPOC community, also because it was the barrier to entry was a lot lower because the cost was like super cheap. And then you had the YMCA, and the YMCA was like most of my white friends would go there. Obviously a lot more expensive. But the point was, like, the premise obviously was very much the same. Like, keep kids engaged, maybe in athletics, maybe martial arts, some type of sport, opportunities to connect with maybe kids that are in their school, don't go to the same school, tutoring, obviously, for those that may need additional support from an academic standpoint. I don't remember if they had therapists there. My guess is probably not, because that was a different time back then. I hope they're doing it now. If they're not, I would love to support them.
Yeah.
But in general, the purpose was to, you know, keep us out of the street. And especially for those that had like working parents who, you know, didn't get off for a long time. And so I'm always a big believer in that. Mentorship's another big one that's really important to me. I loved getting that at the Boys and Girls Club. I believe the YMCA does that the same. And I know how important that is, especially for the youth. Because again, we talked earlier about modeling. Some of us, you know, we're coming from households where you're not really getting any positive examples. Like, we're just going to keep it real. Like, I've done in-home therapies at some places. I worked with foster kids, with DCF. I've done a lot of that stuff. So I've seen some of these environments these kids are coming from.
Yeah.
And so I have no delusions that some of them really don't. You can't really be surprised the way that they behave, you know, because you see the way that the people who take care of them behave. And it's like, come on, man, you're just rinsing and repeating what's going on at home.
in the home. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Which I'm a huge believer in. Again, that's why I'm so big on environment. But anyway, I believe that that's why those programs should exist. And it's great that we have more people to either strengthen the ones that we have, create new ones, you know, whatever. Because I think it's important, because there's going to still be an extraordinary amount of kids who need that level of support and may not get it anywhere else. So it's great if you have somebody like you that wants to go do that type of work in whatever capacity. I think that would be helpful.